Hey, everybody. We are here on behalf of Premier Collectibles. That's my daughter, Paulina. I'm Dr. Drew. We are signing these plates for those of you that have purchased signed books through Premier Collectibles.
Thank you for buying.
Thank you for getting the book. And we will just be signing these things as we go here today. And so, one of the things we were going to we're going to answer your questions and you can send them in.
We'll get to you.
The link is at the website if you want to get again, premiercollectibles.com/awkward. A lot of good questions here. We will get to some of those in a minute. We're going to talk for a few minutes, though, about, somebody's actually asking the question we're going to get into. Why did you two decide to write this book? Was the catalyst an awkward conversation? Was it? Not really. Really, the reason we wrote the book is we decided to do this a while ago.
2019, October of 2019.
Yeah, it was 2019. And I was approached by a group that were interested in writing something about consent. And it was sort of on the heels of the Me Too movement. There was a lot of anxiety and confusion. Look at the South Park episodes from 2019. You'll see a lot of stuff about consent, around consent for young people particularly. And there was some publishers thought that would be a good idea if we really wrote a book about that, which intrigued me. But I thought, if we're going to be dealing with like 12 to 18 to 20-year-olds, you really need a younger voice on the book as well. And thus, Paulina got involved. She's a writer from Columbia. And what did you think when we first called you about this?
You said, we sold the consent book today. And I said, what consent book? And then I consented to writing. Yeah, I mean, consent was, at the forefront of, late 2018, early 2019. It really feels like a lifetime ago, but we were, focused on what it meant to communicate good consent. And there was a lot of confusion about what it meant to communicate good consent.
Well, you were on your college campus. There was a lot going on with
when I was a senior in college, that is when Emma Solkowitz did her performance piece, Carry That Weight, in which she carried her twin XL mattress around campus in protest of her rapist not being expelled. And that was really the first time that I really took a good long look at myself and kind of confronted the ways in which I was perpetuating rape culture. And so, senior in college, 22, that's a little bit too late. And so ultimately, oops, just dropped one. Ultimately, we really wanted to figure out how to communicate this to kids before they got to college, because ultimately college is way too late to have that conversation.
And did an awkward conversation trigger us? Not really, though we revisit many of our awkward conversations in the book as just, a frame for helping people understand these things. Really, the book is more about
relationships.
Yeah, about relationships and about what things to keep in mind as you navigate all kinds of relationships. And I know for Paulina, this was important that we, as a young person, the issues of gender and sexual identity and these issues really wanted them to be prominently discussed.
Yeah, it felt important to me to make this a LGBTQ friendly resource, and especially for those who are intimidated by those topics. We really wanted to introduce them in a way that was nuanced, but also understandable and simple. So whether you are, gender sexuality expert or you have no idea what any of that means, we hope that our text offers something for all of you.
And we developed this idea of something we called TCB, and maybe you want to give that history.
When I was a wee little lass, I was obsessed with Elvis.
Elvis Presley.
Elvis Presley, not Elvis Costello. Though that may upset people. No, Elvis Presley stole my heart at the ripe age of 8. And I immediately started doing research about him. And his rhythm section / his posse was called TCB, and they all wore lightning bolt necklaces that said TCB. And immediately I was like, I need one of those. Mom, I need that, please. And so I wore that necklace for 10 years. And I prayed to Elvis before anything important. And TCB lightning bolt was actually my first tattoo. So TCB has been important to me for different reasons than trust, compassion, and boundaries, which is the ideology of this book.
We took TCB, we converted it into this acronym, trust, compassion, boundaries.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah. And so, it's a spiritual connection for me. I pray to Elvis before anything important. But ultimately, it felt really empowering to repurpose this acronym that has been so central to my life, taking care of business, and bring it to y'all as something that can help you facilitate healthy consent and interpersonal relationships.
Since we've got a bit of time here, how do you, I know that fourth wave feminism is something very important to you.
Mm-hmm.
How do you reconcile that with Elvis Presley as the human being?
I kind of view Elvis the way I feel like a lapsed Catholic views Catholicism, in that there is a connection to God, but there is a problematic element to the institution. So, I mean, throughout my life, it was like, oh, Elvis died on a toilet, ha ha ha, and also like he's problematic. He married a 14-year-old. Well, he didn't. He had her move into the house when she was 14. He married her at 16.
We make a point that you can't consent at that age.
You can't consent at that age, and Priscilla Presley, God bless you, but that was a little bit too young. So I think that we all have problematic faves. No one is truly ethical under capitalism.
And do you, oh, please. And do you, how would you analyze the difficulty if you were criticizing the church?
I would say there's a very clear trajectory of stealing Black music. The way that they sort of condone it in terms of like Elvis movies and biopics is like, oh, he would give a Cadillac to a random Black family in Memphis. Look at him giving to the Black community. And it's like,
did he ever acknowledge
stole from the Black community?
Did he ever?
He would, the way that it's sort of cast now is that like he, would sneak into Black churches and listen to gospel. And, he like very much was, as far as I know, I wasn't alive then, but there was a clear reverence for Black culture and Black music.
Right. Does that mean he stole it?
Yes.
Okay.
There are like direct songs that he took.
Okay.
But I also think that is like a distinctly American phenomena. Like, I think that we're still profiting off of Black culture. Look at the Kardashians, like lip fillers, butt implants, like that's co-opting Black features and profiting from it. And so,
well, certainly music,
especially,
and comedy.
Yeah,
I think so to some extent. The first stand-up comedian really was Moms Mabley, wasn't she? First person to stand up and tell jokes like that as a Black woman. Interesting.
That is interesting. We have a lot to give thanks to Black culture.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For all white people. Thank you.
So let's get to some of so anyway, TCB. So we talk about all kinds of relationships in the book, whether it's, with family members or with teachers or with bullies or, and how to be an ally is something Paulina put pretty prominently in there, right? So how to help other people that might need assistance. Talk about drugs and alcohol and navigating all that, and how that if you're intoxicated, you cannot render consent. There's no literally, we wanted to move consent away from, medical consent and legal consent and that kind of stuff.
Or even just sexual consent.
Right. But there is actual boundaries in the law where if you're can't drive a car because of alcohol, you cannot render consent. You just can't. It's a legal impossibility, and it's not a bad criteria or threshold from a standpoint of the psychological or even neurobiological ability to render consent. When you're intoxicated, you are on drugs. You make different decisions when you are.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What if you render consent before being intoxicated?
I think you'd be within your right to give consent. However, somebody could make a case. So if you're somebody intoxicated, you should be aware of this. Somebody could say, I decided, I didn't want this anymore, but I was too intoxicated to really communicate it properly or whatever. Or now this even a more problematic thing, which is I look back on it and it wasn't right for me, but I was too loaded to really realize it at the time. But now that I'm not loaded, I realize it. That I don't know how the law would look at that, but you don't want to be in that position. Yeah, believe me, you wouldn't want to do that to somebody. So,
Ultimately, consent is an ongoing negotiation and it can be revoked at any point. And so I hear the consensus being that if you were intoxicated and you initially consent to the initiated interaction, you don't relate to yourself as clearly. And so you can't check in with trust, compassion, and boundaries. Yeah.
yeah, and once you maybe articulate that again, that the compassion and trust in yourself is an important thing too, not just the other person.
Yeah, the sort of foundational idea of this book is that if you can trust yourself, have compassion for yourself, and know your own boundaries, then you'll be able to trust someone else, offer them compassion, and respect their boundaries.
So questions here. Let me look at where we are now. Okay. What is the most awkward conversation you ever had with Adam Carolla over the years, and did it end well?
I feel like he predicted my eating disorder.
That's true.
How does he feel about that? Pretty awkward.
It's hard to make him feel awkward about anything. So I don't think they would have ended awkward. And he's the kind of person that if you go, if you apologize or want to put something behind you, he's always prepared to do that. He's very, very, very flexible that way. But I don't remember ever having any awkward conversations with him. Well,
he
a lot
said
of
he
them
would build me a treehouse in the 3rd grade and never did, and that's pretty awkward.
he gets to be kind of harsh and bully at times, and he doesn't even realize it, but that's what people like that are sometimes. Are kids being exposed to sex at earlier ages? As kids are being exposed to earlier ages, what age should you start talking about consent and such with your child? So we kind of avoid giving prescriptions in terms of a specific age. We do think you should, at any age, be open to talking to your kids and to ask them if they have any questions, and be prepared that they're getting exposed to stuff, sort of pre-adolescent matters of what's on the internet.
Ultimately, it's about creating a space of communication, right?
Yeah.
So if that door is open, then they will feel comfortable coming to you with questions.
Right.
And, you say this over and over again. It's not about, going through the plumbing lesson, setting them down and saying, here's a penis and here's a vagina.
Finally, my chance. I can tell you all this stuff I need you to know.
Yeah, it's more about kind of littering in the conversation questions throughout the trajectory of their lives.
And just answer their questions. Check in to make sure that you answered it to their satisfaction, and do they have other questions, and that maybe express some values and some ideas of your own in there. An important one always is like 16 is kind of a threshold you want to try to get to before you have sexual experiences. The brain is just not, most experts will say the brain is just not developmentally there to be able to handle sexual intimacies, and so communicating that and your values and things to them is important, but don't leap into a big conversation because you need them to have that information. Just answer their questions, see if they have any more questions, and encourage them to come back as other things come up. And you can ask questions too. We never really got into this. You can also go, what's going on at school? Or and a good way to do that, by the way, is if you're talking to a young male, they do very poorly with face-to-face conversation. So you have to both be facing out for the young males. And even a better way to do it is be engaged in a common activity. I have colleagues that treat only males. And when they do that, they'll often put a basketball court in the back of their office so they can go out and just shoot hoops, so they can sort of get that young male to start opening and communicating. For the young females, the way the hormonal fluctuations go throughout the day, they tend to be more open to conversation late in the evening, like around 9 or 10 o'clock at night. So you can always just sit down on the bedside and say, hey, how was your day? And you'll find much more free-flowing information later in the day than perhaps at other times of the day.
What would you say about non-binary or gender non-conforming children?
I didn't say anything about gender. It's a biology, strictly biology. You
said female or male?
Biologically. Sex, female, sex, male. People with XY chromosomes and XX chromosomes. And by the way, I could even say that XXY, XO would have the same as the XX, XXY would have the same as XY probably. So these biological states are what they are. If it were somebody transgender on hormones, then probably, I don't know this to be true, but I would imagine the opposite would be true.
So testosterone heavy versus estrogen
Yeah,
heavy.
yeah, yeah. I want my daughter to be open, but I also want her privacy. What are the best methods to keep lines of communication open as they grow? What are the boundaries? What do you say, Paulina? Diaries off limits?
Yeah, don't read their diary.
Yeah.
Please don't.
Yeah.
Your child needs a space that's distinctly their own. And I think gifting your child a diary is one of the best things that you can do. I think for me, throughout my childhood, that was a way that I could connect to myself, had a safe space, and then I would read it to my friends as adolescent / 20-year-old, and it was fine. But ultimately, you know, I think giving them a journal, giving them their space, but also I think ultimately, like, it's up to the parent to sort of create boundaries in a specific way while your child figures out their own boundaries. Would you say so?
What do you mean? I'm not quite sure what you're saying.
Well, isn't the
Like,
question like, let me see the question.
uh,
I want my daughter to be open, but I also want her to have privacy. What are the best methods?
okay, I would say the best thing is give them a specific space, like Paulina said, but also stick with open-ended questions frequently. I'm wondering, I've noticed, those are words you need to master. I'm just thinking. Don't ever go at them with "you need to know" or "you're doing this." That all gets a force field.
Asking open-ended and specific questions, like, I noticed Jonathan hasn't been coming to the house anymore.
Right.
What's that about?
Right. And not even going so far as "what's that about" may be too far, because that already gets their anxiety up. Like, I have to tell them. Just stay wide open. Just anything up, anything going on, that kind of thing. And it depends also what you're dealing with. If you have problems, if there are mental health issues, I guess an important thing we didn't talk about in this whole book tour is distinguishing between a parenting issue and mental health issues. And at the point it stops becoming if someone is manifesting multiple symptomatologies, that is to say, they're changing their attire, they're changing their fan group, they're changing their eating pattern, they're changing their sleeping pattern, and maybe there's an STD, or maybe there's some sort of, you're aware of some sort of sexual acting out, or maybe there's an unwanted pregnancy. All those things are all symptoms of a mental health problem.
But I would dare to say, though, there's a distinction between mental health disturbances and trans identity, right?
I wasn't talking about that.
I know, but I'm just saying the distinction needs to be made.
And trans identity, mental health, and yet, so again,
because that does require a change in how you dress and how you communicate and all those things.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about somebody who doesn't sleep or sleeps too much or isn't eating or eats too much. But it is an interesting point, which is that so how would you deal with someone who wanted to contemplate, like a 14-year-old, let's say, or a 12-year-old wanted to contemplate a transition? You can't make that has to be medicalized, right? You can't do it.
I mean, it is medicalized, but I also think that it's not a symptom of a disturbance. It's a symptom of, coming to terms with their identity. So I just want to make that distinction in case there are trans kids in your life and they are making changes that are conducive to their gender identity. I'm of the position that people have lots of feelings about what age this should be started, and whether you puberty, all this kind of stuff. And there are clearly cases where that is the right thing to do, and there are clearly cases where that's problematic. And I put the responsibility for that squarely on the medical professionals. We should be able to pick the right person for the right treatment, and the right circumstance for the right treatment. And if we can't do that, that's on us. That's not on the patients. So nor the family. So it's a complicated landscape. Let's see. Why did you decide to write this book? We did that. What do you hope the readers will take away from the book? I hope that readers will step away from this book having thought about their own identity and the way that they relate to themselves a little bit more thoroughly. And then after kind of assessing where they are, thinking about the way they move through relationships and whether it is TCB friendly. One of the things I really enjoy about this book is that there's a lot of guideposts, excuse me, for what is a healthy relationship. And one of them that I'm thinking about specifically is relationships with adults and teachers and parents. And, in my own experience, I had a teacher in high school who systematically picked on me and screamed in my face a couple times. And as a child, I didn't understand that that was inappropriate behavior. And if I had read this book, I think I would have advocated for myself a little bit more fiercely and been in more direct communication with my parents and the administration.
That's good. I hope, I hope for healthier relationships and less pain for people. I mean, bottom line, that these, we constructed this thing in such a way that if you're paying attention to these things, you're going to make better choices typically, and better choices makes for healthier outcomes. Pretty simple. Doesn't have to be awkward.
But sometimes it is.
Anything surprised us in writing the book?
I
was sort of surprised about how much how much once we figured out TCB, how much applied all over the place.
Yeah.
That was sort of surprising.
Yeah.
And we really started thinking about other things, how many topics we started, we had to leave stuff out. Because there were lots and lots of other things that were sort of getting folded in.
Yeah, I think finding that central framework was instrumental in terms of moving through topics in this book, but also I think in terms of relating to each other. I think now that we have this framework, we can move through any kind of difficult conversation. So it's applicable to us too. We learned something.
Doesn't have to be awkward. Okay. Okay, more questions. I think we're surprised to learn about each other.
I had always heard about my dad's first depressive episode in his early 20s, and that leading to
19,
leading to leaving school for a short period of time, and kind of I guess I didn't realize like how much genetics are destiny, and so I have a vivid memory of my 20th birthday, having a cupcake in my hand, calling my dad, crying, being like, I'm just so sad. And him being like, yeah, me too. I understand. So ultimately, I think, it's not about, being like, I had my first beer when I was 14. We don't need to know those details. But I think sharing about the struggles that you've gone through can help your child, because ultimately, for the most part, there are obviously parents who are not biological parents, but in terms of
still, even if they're not,
like that sort of transparency when it comes to what you've struggled with will, I think, help your child.
Yeah, it's weird to me that people have difficulty talking about important topics. I mean, it's just so weird to me, particularly things like health or mental health. I don't understand. Maybe because I sort of, lived in a psychiatric hospital for all those years working. That was, so matter of fact to me. It's hard to relate.
Wait, you didn't answer what you learned about me?
Learned what a great writer you were. I learned about I didn't know about the feminism in your treatment. I didn't know about that. I learned that. I knew there was something like that there, but I didn't know it as explicitly as that. I learned a lot of little things. It felt like, a lot of stuff like what, importance you put into being an ally, and a lot of little stuff.
I'll take it.
Son is 7, typically ask questions. Why are there clouds? Those answers don't have to be concrete, but what do I do if my child asks a question I don't know the answer to? I don't want to plant misguided thought in his little mind.
I think, it's amazing when a kid is inquisitive and constantly asks questions, but it's also a challenge. And I think ultimately it's okay to admit when you don't have an answer.
Right. It's okay to say, I don't know. Now, but what my question is, something I didn't have to deal with. should you get on the internet and go, let's look that up? Or is
Hmm.
that giving them a false sense of how to get information? You know, because people are over reliant on that kind of information that may be very thin.
Yeah, I
You
would
know,
say rely on your
Dunning-Kruger.
self-knowledge and then get a book about clouds. You know, I think there's a way to incorporate that information that is not entirely dependent on pulling up your phone and finding an answer, right? It's like, oh, you know about cumulus clouds. Let's get a book about clouds so that we can identify more.
So are you saying
clouds.
that it's more of an opportunity to teach about learning and reading?
Exactly.
I agree with that. Interesting. What's my stance on schools providing sexual education? Should it be inclusive of all sexual orientations? The question comes up because I'm a mom in my state recently exploded at the school board because an assigned reading contained a story about anal sex.
We heard about that.
We heard that.
Yeah, I mean, anal sex is a little explicit, but I think that sex education should be a part of every school. And, you know, I think it gets a little complicated because of states' rights. Like some states think it's okay to teach abstinence only, not arming their children with any information. And then, you know, there are other approaches that are just simply doling out the mechanics. And so, I mean, if I had my way, we would just gut the sexual education and go to, I have like friends of mine who are brilliant, beautiful sex educators who would truly revolutionize this country. So my stance is that it should be a part of the curriculum, because ultimately how we approach sex is going to impact each and every kid. And if you're going at it as a shameful thing, if you're going at it as a harmful thing, then children are not going to be able to relate to each other and engage in ways that are healthy for them.
I don't disagree with anything you said. However, it's such a difficult navigation in terms of how far do you go with this. I mean, do you keep it medical and clinical, or do you start to get into the real experiences of people and the stuff they're getting into on the internet? I mean, how do you, I mean, we sort of stayed out of it in this book intentionally because we felt first of all, it's all out there already. And secondly, healthy relationships are in short supply and more the issue. And if people are paying attention to those things, they won't make bad choices. And some of these more explicit questions won't be as kind of, I don't know, they may not be as important. The other difficult landscape is, you know, if we're teaching sexuality per se, do we have to get into gender? And that's kind of a separate topic. And I don't know the answer.
I think that gender should absolutely be part of the conversation. What each state would do with that conversation scares me. But I think that it's instrumental in terms of identifying self, identifying your sexuality, and identifying.
Well, gender is not sexuality.
I know,
right?
but I mean, it's a facet of identity, right? And
yeah, but this isn't a
full identity.
But that's the question. Should sex education get into a psychological process like identity at all? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
I think the more we can talk about it, the better.
Possibly. All right, let's see. And yes, inclusive of all sexual orientations. We definitely feel that should be. My daughter's 15. We had talk and she's very open. I trust her judgment. Don't want to curiosity. Keep her safe and healthy. I don't want her to leave my house for college and open shop, so to speak, because she felt so restricted under my roof. I also worry about technology and its role in ruining young kids' lives. Ashley, you expressed a whole bunch of anxiety there, but not any question.
And phones are ruining my life. So
what phones?
Yeah, I feel like my brain is leaking out of my ears every day.
Because of social media?
Because of social media, because I mean, even just promoting this book, I've been staring at my phone so much more.
Yeah.
And I'm a happier, healthier person when I'm not looking at my phone.
Right. In fact, you declared a 24-hour moratorium the other day, and it seemed like you made it about 14 hours.
Yeah, well, because mom started calling. She didn't read the text, and she was like, "Why are you so mad all the time?" Like, my phone was off, and I was asleep. But you know, I think we could stand to have more boundaries with our phones.
Yeah. That's for sure. And particularly, you know, my friends that work in this field restrict their kids to like an hour a day. people that really, psychologists that really work in and around the problems associated with screens, just they're very restrictive. Just like I was sort of really deliberate about drugs and alcohol, she's very deliberate about screens, very, very. So I don't know. It's hard. And in terms of being overly restrictive under your roof, I wouldn't worry so much about that. It's again, this is the issue of boundaries. And if you're paying attention to what's your anxiety and your needs, and then being clear with her about what are yours and why you have them, and then what are her needs, then you should be able to navigate that pretty well.
And I think too, like, make space for her to figure out her sexual everything. I mean, for me, I went to college and opened up shop, and I'm okay. I did just say that. I'm sorry.
It's all right. What conversation is most awkward? Wait, to whom? The kids or the parents? It's both, but different. And trust me, the kids are weirded out as well.
Mm-hmm. I screamed through a lot of conversations. And by scream, I mean just run out.
Can Paulina talk about the path to becoming a writer? What was it like working on the book together? But first, on your path.
So the first thing that I ever published was a blog for Endangered Bodies, which is an organization here in New York that talked about media literacy and sort of the way in which body image is projected into the larger culture, and sort of, it was a body positive organization. So that was my first blog post. And so from that blog post, my friend from college, Adina Alpelbaum, she asked me to write a piece for the Columbia Spectator, the art magazine for the Columbia Spectator, so the Eye. And so the first—
What's it called? The Eye?
The Eye. So my first essay was Get Your Teeth Checked, which explored intergenerational body trauma, eating disorder recovery, and my relationship to my mom. And ultimately that piece was about all that, and it was well received within my community. It was the first time that I was recognized as anything other than, a performer, a figure skater, or whatever. And so
within your community, what does that mean?
Like at Barnard and Columbia,
cool. Yeah.
At school. And so 6 months later, New York Post, I think, hung on to that for 6 months because they happened to drop it during Eating Disorder Awareness Week, in which they pulled the hook of my essay, which is my mom telling me to get my teeth checked, and blew it up. And so that kind of projectiled me to this platform that I have proximity to. And, I would say that I was recognized as a writer before I recognized myself as a writer. From that piece, I would write a lot of pieces in the Columbia Spectator about weight bias and, fat stigma and eating disorder recovery. So I kind of cut my teeth writing op-eds for the Columbia Spectator and the Huffington Post, HuffPo Women. However, after I graduated from college, I did not want to be eating disorder girl anymore. It was really hard to kind of stay in that space. And so I actually pursued comedy at the Second City Conservatory in 2016. But ultimately, my senior year of college, I took a nonfiction creative writing workshop. So that was my first writing workshop. And it was taught by a MFA student in Columbia. And so that was the first time that MFA was in my orbit. Before that, I was like, I like to write, but I don't know how I can sustain that. And so while I was in Chicago for 9 months, I applied to MFA programs. And so for me, the MFA was instrumental in terms of my journey as a writer. My first year, I, was convinced I was an imposter. I felt like I didn't belong there. Everyone was so hyper intellectual and had no sense of humor. I just walk into the room and the anal tone could crack glass.
That's crazy.
I would say the Columbia MFA is not the funniest place on earth. But because I had this comedic training, I started teaching comedy writing to high schoolers through the MFA program. So the MFA both taught me that I'm a writer, and it also showed me that I'm a teacher. And so what I would say for anybody who is pursuing writing, I think the act of writing makes you a writer. I don't think that an MFA makes you a writer. I know plenty of people who have MFAs who are terrible writers. Zing. But for me, my MFA was a privilege. It was this opportunity to really sit in an incubator and develop my voice. And then, I graduated in 2019, June of 2019, and then this book kind of waltzed into my life, fall of 2019. And
then COVID.
happened.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I am currently pursuing a memoir, which I received a McDowell Fellowship for March of 2021. So ultimately, the trajectory keeps going. I think ultimately, if you write, you're a writer. I think cultivating a practice for yourself is really important. The artist way, Julie Cameron's artist way, is sort of fundamental in terms of how I relate to myself as an artist and how I practice as an artist. But, for years, the question of like, how do I know I'm a writer? What do you do? Do you get up at 6 a.m.? Do you write all night? I think ultimately it's up to you to decide what your rhythms are.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I always keep hearing about, oh, what do you do? I get up every morning and I write. You hear that a lot.
Well, I'm there now.
Yeah.
But that took 5 years to cultivate that practice. And so I also had an amazing professor named Jenny Zhang, who really kind of clarified everything for me, in that she was saying everything is writing, right? Sleeping is writing, getting dressed is writing, traveling is writing. All of the sort of aspects of living feed your primary practice. And so even if you're not writing, you are feeding your practice, whether you know it or not.
But you better write.
But right, yeah, but do write.
Right, writing without actually writing is not writing.
Yeah, well, so the baseline for me, like, if today I'm probably not going to write, but first thing I do when I wake up is do 3 pages by hand, stream of consciousness. For some people, that means writing like, this is stupid, this is stupid, this is stupid. I hate
Is
this.
by hand important?
Yes.
Why?
I think writing is a bodily experience, and though I write pieces, like long form pieces, on my computer, all of my ideas come from my morning pages. Julia Cameron will say, your morning pages are the place to dream, to rest, to explore. And you'd be surprised at how many ideas come to you if you are constantly checking in with yourself.
Teenage son, they need time alone. I'm not ashamed of what he may be doing and don't want to embarrass him by acknowledging it, but I want to make sure he knows it's all right and natural. Is it worth addressing or avoid it? Rebecca. Just give him the space. That's all. I mean, it will weird him out to think otherwise. Yeah, just leave him alone. What was the research process? Are there any points, stories, themes that didn't make it into the book?
We really, well, first we met with my friend Halen Belay, who's a brilliant sex educator. And that was sort of instrumental in terms of our foundational idea of what consent means. And so after meeting with her, we did a lot of research of what consent books are on the marketplace. So I'm not gonna be able to conjure names, but I literally have, if you look at the sort of bestsellers in teen dating and they have to do with consent, they're on my bookshelf. I read them.
And we put a lot of resources into the book itself too. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
We have a recommended reading and resource section of our book. Ultimately, I think one of the books that I really am sad didn't make it was wait, let me figure it out. I read so many books and I can't
keep up with
top of
yourself.
mind. Yeah. It's called Unpregnant.
Oh, never heard of that one.
It's a beautiful YA fiction book about a girl who gets accidentally pregnant, and her ex-best friend travel across state lines to achieve an abortion. And I think any sort of narrative that includes abortion and doesn't, villainize it is really important, especially with what is going on in Texas right now.
Was this from some time in the past when you had to cross state lines to do that?
I mean, you still have to do that in this country.
Where? Oh.
Texas.
But that's a new thing.
I know, but just because it exists doesn't mean that people are being fair practitioners of it. I would say, there's abortion clinics that are literally set up to that are,
Set up to make copy out.
yeah. So,
Signing books too. That's why I've been wandering around here. Right? Signing books?
yeah, we'll sign books. You got books, I got nameplates. And then themes that didn't make it in the book. What didn't make it?
I can't remember. We had a couple of chapters we wanted to put in. I can't now remember what they were anymore.
I know it's
But
been so long.
I know there was stuff we sort of, we got rid of. You know what we got rid of? We got rid of a lot of the more biological stuff.
Okay.
We got rid of a lot of that. And we got rid of things that we felt like they were elsewhere. But
Yeah,
wait, are we confusing books that are signed and not?
No,
signed
this
here?
isn't, this is unsigned.
Okay.
Here's one that's unsigned. Yeah, I think we chucked a lot of the science, which is his stuff.
What is the research process like? I think she told you that she's reading and looking and going to websites and seeing what else is out there. That was not easy.
No, it wasn't. Especially because I am not the arbiter of consent, nor am I a sex educator. And I
Right.
really wanted to be explicit about the fact that I'm a writer. And, I have so much respect for sex educators. And ultimately, I didn't want to pretend to be anything but what I am. So back to that imposter syndrome. Like, I know it well.
All right, so I'm going to hand you 2 books here. There
Gorgeous.
we go. This is for Paulina. I'm a single dad of a 10-year-old girl. She always comes to me for everything, but we are going to hit a point where where I don't have the answers. I still want to know what is going on. I'm obviously talking about the changing body of a girl. Is it okay to have an aunt or adult friend talk to her? If I do so, how do I not lose her trust by wanting the inside scoop? I don't need every gory detail, but heads up is good.
The first thing I think of is the book by American Girl called The Care and Keeping of You. I know a ton of my friends learned about their bodies from The Care and Keeping of You. The Care and Keeping of You.
The book.
The book.
Okay.
So I would recommend getting her that book.
Care and feeding of
The
you.
Care and Keeping.
Keeping.
I would get her that book because I feel like it has all the information that you're trying to convey, and it also makes it more accessible for her, right? This is something that she can do on her own time.
It's something you just leave and say, hey, why
something
don't you
you
read
give
this
to
or
her.
something?
Yeah.
What do you think about having an aunt or another female trusted friend come in?
It's funny because, we got asked this question of like, how did y'all deal with me and my pubescent body? And I don't really remember having anybody be like, this is what's going to happen. I mean, I learned about it in school. I was privileged in that my school really took sex education seriously. And I think it depends on her relationship to that person, right? If you're just picking someone because they're female, I think that's gonna backfire.
Yeah, that might backfire.
But if Auntie Jane is the person that she goes to for everything, then it makes sense for her to talk to them.
Yeah, and his thing, I think he's really asking. I think what he's really asking us though is how does he stay in the loop if he does that? I think definitely you have another adult female talker. There's no doubt in my mind that's the right thing to do. But I agree with Paulina, it's got to be the right one. In terms of, there may well be stuff she does not want you to know, and that's just fine. And thank God she has Auntie Jane for that. I would ask that Auntie Jane do keep you in the loop.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And maybe advise you on what you might want to talk further about or not. But yeah, I think that's a great idea. You don't have to know everything. You don't. It's not your job to know everything. That's a boundary problem when you feel you have to know everything. You have to make sure that her needs are attended to, and that would be a good relationship with another female. That would be important.
Well, I think too, you can ask her, right? Like, how was your conversation with Auntie Jane?
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. That you should be, how'd it go? How was it? Anything you want to share with me? Any questions? Did she answer everything satisfactorily? hope you're not, hope we can talk about more of this stuff when you feel comfortable or whatever.
I'm here for you.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Great question.
Yeah, it is a good question. I think.
Have we rolled through everything?
I think we've rolled through all of our questions. Our time is virtually up here, believe it or not.
Ask your questions now or forever hold them.
Or not, or just text them, or maybe on social media if they have further questions.
Yeah.
Where?
I am at MIZPiggy111 on Twitter and Instagram, and my website is paulinapinsky.com. I am available for writing coaching needs or editing.
I'm looking at the Twitter, see if there's any other questions out and about here.
Let's see.
Okay.
Anybody come for me yet?
You get stuff on Instagram, don't you, a lot?
Yeah.
What's your Instagram again?
MIZPiggy111.
Sorry about this. We're quiet because we're checking to see if there's other questions hanging around here somewhere. All right, let me look again through the scroll here at the website. All right. Yeah, it has been our privilege. We appreciate you guys buying the book and reading the book, and do leave it out for your kids, and it will help you. I think we ended up being very happy with how this thing turned out. And would you agree?
I would agree, and I would say that it's helped us facilitate conversations where there was virtually no communication.
How dare you?
Well,
we'll have to TCB that a little more. Whatever that was. That was a boundary violation I've ever heard one. And non-compassionate.
I'm sorry.
That's fine. I'm just kidding. So anyway, thank you for being here, and it doesn't have to be awkward. Get it now, and we appreciate your support. And look for Paulina on her Twitter site. Mine is at Dr. Drew. I'm not so much on Instagram. My Twitter, I sort of check in on that, so you can ask stuff there. And thank you so much.
And we'll keep signing.
Thank you. We'll get them all done.
Hey, this is John Acuff, New York Times best-selling author of 7 books and someone who's done a live signing. If you like the one you just watched, make sure you check out our YouTube channel. It's full of amazing authors having great conversations and signing books for viewers just like you. So make sure you subscribe, and thanks for watching today.